There is a new trend taking over Major League Baseball. Actually, new isn't quite the right word for it. You might have heard that 2023 was the year of the sweeper. Last year, it seemed like everyone was throwing big breaking pitches with 10, 15, or even 20 inches of movement. Prior to that, we saw the rise of the high fastball, as an increased focus on velocity and spin rate led to unprecedented swings and misses from hitters. Now, in 2024, there's another pitch that's become all the rage. A pitch that, if you've been watching MLB for long enough, you'll be all too familiar with. The splitter, or split-finger fastball, has a turbulent history. We can trace its origins back to the dead ball era, when several players used similar pitches to baffle opposing lineups. In the years to follow, though, the pitch fell out of use, only to be revived again in the late 70s and early 80s. But then, like before, the splitter all but disappeared from Major League Baseball, thrown only by a select group of pitchers. Today, the splitter is on the rise once again. Use of the pitch has more than doubled in recent years, with some of MLB's biggest names getting in on the action. Pitchers like Zach Wheeler of the Phillies, Hunter Greene of the Reds, and Jordan Hicks of the Giants are just a few who have added a splitter to their arsenal this season. Others have greatly increased their use of the pitch, like the Rockies' Cal Quantrill, who's nearly tripled his usage from last year. So then, what's driving this increase in splitters? If it's so effective, why did it take until now for pitchers to start using it again? And why exactly did it disappear in the first place? Let's talk about it. Who invented the splitter? This is a surprisingly hard question to answer, because the splitter, as we know it today, actually evolved from a different pitch altogether, the forkball. While its exact origins are debated, the forkball was popularized in the 1920s by a pitcher named Bullet Joe Bush, who stumbled upon the pitch while with the Boston Red Sox. According to Bullet Joe, he was experimenting with different grips one day when he placed the ball between his index and middle fingers, with his thumb on the bottom. Throwing it like a fastball, the ball exhibited a sharp downward break, not unlike the recently banned spitball. Bullet Joe and his forkball were so effective, in fact, that many hitters were convinced he actually was throwing a spitball. In a game against the Tigers, Ty Cobb was so flustered by the pitch that he insisted Bush had to be cheating. When the umpire asked him how he got the ball to move like that, Bullet Joe told him he wasn't doing anything illegal, but he also wasn't about to give up his secret. Eventually, though, Bush's technique got out, and the forkball became famous. Despite Bullet Joe's success, however, only a few others adopted the pitch. See, for as effective as a well-thrown forkball could be, it was just as difficult to control. Because of this, most hurlers opted for other off-speed pitches, like curveballs, sliders, or changeups. By the 60s, the forkball had become rare, thrown by just a small group of pitchers. But then, in the 1970s, something strange happened. In 1971, the Chicago Cubs had signed an 18-year-old by the name of Bruce Sutter. Armed with a wicked fastball, Sutter excelled in the Cubs minor league system, for all of 5 innings, before injuring his elbow. When he arrived for spring training in '73, Sutter made a terrible discovery. His fastball was gone. Luckily, pitching coach Fred Martin had a solution for the young prospect. See, Fred Martin had spent most of his playing career as a minor league pitcher. During that time, he relied on his signature split-finger pitch for success. Although Martin's splitter was similar to the forkballs of the past, it had a few key differences. Unlike the forkball, which sits deep in the hand, the splitter is held towards the fingers. The splitter is also faster than the forkball, thrown with a stiffer wrist, like a fastball, and with more spin. We'll get back to that last part in a bit. Working together with Martin, Bruce Sutter adopted the splitter as his primary pitch. He made his MLB debut in 1976, appearing in 52 games for Chicago. He was an All-Star the next season, and finished second in the National League in saves, with 31. In September of 1979, Sports Illustrated ran an article about Sutter, who at that point was just 3 saves away from the NL record of 37. They credited his dominance to the splitter, calling it a, quote, magic pitch. Sure enough, Sutter would tie the record, lead MLB in saves, and take home the Cy Young Award.
Does it give you a good feeling to know you can go up there and get anybody out?
Well, some days I can get anybody out, and some days anybody can hit me.
In 2006, he became the first pitcher to make the Hall of Fame without starting a major league game. Thanks to Bruce Sutter, the 70s saw the splitter go from a trade secret to the talk of baseball. It was in the decade to follow, though, that the pitch would really take off. Besides Sutter and Martin, there's one more person from this era responsible for popularizing the splitter. Roger Craig was the definition of a baseball lifer. He spent 12 years as a major league pitcher, appearing on 2 World Series teams for the Dodgers and another with the Cardinals. After retiring as a player, he became the manager of the San Diego Padres, leading them to their first winning record in 1978. He was a Tigers coach from 1980 to 84, when he won yet another championship. He was then hired to manage the San Francisco Giants, whom he took to the '89 World Series, before retiring for good in 1992. During that time, Roger Craig was known for 2 things. The first was his catchphrase, "Hum baby," which he said so often that it became a rallying cry for the Giants of the late 80s.
What has this season meant to you so far?
It's been a hum baby season.
Hum baby, hum baby, hum baby, hum baby.
The Hum Baby Giants, the best in the West, has been brought to you by your neighborhood AM/PM mini market.
The second thing Craig was famous for was teaching the splitter to every player he could get his hands on. As a coach for Detroit, he asked each pitcher to try it out. In 1984, the year the Tigers won it all, 4 of their 5 starting pitchers had a split finger of some kind. This included Jack Morris, who threw one of the most devastating splitters in history, riding it all the way to Cooperstown. Mike Scott of the Houston Astros was another student of Roger Craig. Through the end of 1984, Scott had played 6 MLB seasons, posting a less than stellar record of 29 and 44. With his career hanging by a thread, he decided to make a change. He arranged a meeting with Craig, who taught him how to throw the splitter. 1985 would be Mike Scott's best season yet. He went 18-8 over 221 innings, struck out 137 batters, and led the Astros staff with a 3.29 ERA. The splitter accounted for over a third of his pitches thrown, and the more he threw it, the better it got. If 85 was Scott's best season yet, though, 86 was a revelation. As the Houston ace, Mike Scott led all of Major League Baseball in ERA, strikeouts, innings pitched, WHIP, hits per 9, strikeout per 9, and strikeout to walk ratio. His 306 punchouts beat the second best pitcher by over 60 and were the most by anybody since J.R. Richard in 1979. He tossed a no-hitter against the Giants that September and threw a pair of complete games in the NLCS versus the Mets. Lenny Dykstra said that Scott's splitter was like, quote, a wiffle ball moving in the wind. Scott won the NL Cy Young Award that year, and although he'd never again reach those heights, he finished out the decade as one of the most dominant arms in the league. In June of 1986, less than 7 years after they wrote about Bruce Sutter, Sports Illustrated declared the splitter the pitch of the 80s. It seemed like everybody was throwing one. There was Ron Darling, Oral Hershiser, Bob Welch, Dave Stewart, and Roger Clemens, just to name a few. Opposing hitters were helpless to stop it. Even Tony Gwynn, who could hit just about anything, said the splitter was the most difficult pitch for him to face. Through the 1990s, the splitter remained the pitch of choice for several of baseball's top arms. By this point, though, a change was beginning to take place. A change which would stop the pitch of the 80s in its tracks. For all the fanfare for the splitter, not everyone was in love. After Jack Morris got off to a slow start in 1986, Tigers manager Sparky Anderson blamed it for ruining his other pitches. Anderson didn't think much of splitters at all, in fact, calling it nothing but a new toy. Other teams were wary as well, worrying that prolonged use of the splitter would lead to injuries. These concerns weren't completely unfounded. Ron Darling blamed the pitch for shortening his career. Brian Harvey, a splitter-heavy relief pitcher, had his career ended by elbow problems in 1995. John Smoltz stopped throwing the pitch in 1999 due to arm pain, and lost all of the 2000 season to Tommy John surgery. Now, there's never been conclusive evidence that the splitter is inherently dangerous, at least more than other pitches. Several hurlers threw it well into their late 30s, such as Chuck Finley, Curt Schilling, and Jack Morris himself. But that didn't stop MLB teams from discouraging the practice anyway. Twins pitching coach Rick Anderson told his staff to shy away from the splitter. Reds coach Brian Price refused to teach it to any of his younger players. Manager Joe Madden warned that over-reliance on the splitter would stop pitchers from developing their other pitches, because, and I quote, they'll always get guys out with that pitch. If you're confused by the logic in that statement, don't worry. so am I. Regardless of whether the reasoning made sense, however, MLB saw a sharp drop in splitter usage during the 2000s. It should be noted, however, that this is just counting MLB pitchers. At the same time that American teams were shunning the splitter, in leagues like Japan's NPB, the pitch was more popular than ever. Japan's love for the pitch began in the 50s, when Shigeru Sugashita, also known as the God of Forkballs, was the best pitcher in the league. In 1954, Sugashita won 32 games for the Chunichi Dragons, posting a 1.39 ERA across a whopping 395 innings. His success inspired the next generation of Japanese hurlers, and by the mid-70s, they were using the forkball regularly. This included Shoji Murata, who struck out over 2,300 batters across 2 decades with the Lotte Orions. Liron Lee, an MLB outfielder who joined the Orions in 1977, said Murata was the best pitcher he'd ever seen besides Bob Gibson. When Hideo Nomo debuted with the Dodgers in 1995, he became the first Japanese-born player to join an MLB team after retiring from NPB. Along with him, Nomo brought a blazing fastball, international media attention, and a forkball. Following in Nomo's footsteps, a number of Japanese pitchers, and their splitters, joined MLB in the late 90s and 2000s. Mariners reliever Kazuhiro Sasaki threw a splitter so good it had a name of its own, the Fang. And while they didn't all have nicknames, the splitters thrown by Hiroki Kuroda, Junichi Tozawa, and Koji Uehara were no less devastating. During the World Baseball Classic in 2023, 55% of all splitters came from Team Japan, and with superstars like Shohei Ohtani, Yu Darvish, and Yoshinobu Yamamoto among their ranks, Japanese arms carved up opposing lineups en route to the WBC title. Given Team Japan's success, plus the recent influx of pitchers like Yamamoto, Kodai Senga of the Mets, and Shota Imanaga of the Cubs, it's no surprise that splitters are back in vogue in MLB as well. Now, with all we know about its history, how is the splitter faring in the modern era? In 2021, Major League Baseball saw a total of 11,183 splitters. That may seem like a lot, but it made up just 1.6% of all pitches thrown that year. 2022 was similar. In 2023, however, we began to see a change. Out of almost 718,000 MLB pitches last year, nearly 16,000, or 2.2%, were split fingers. That trend has continued into this year as well. As of June 2024, the splitter rate has risen to 3.2%, double the amount from just 2 years earlier. The reason for this change, meanwhile, is a simple one. On a per-pitch basis, the split-finger fastball is very effective. And by very effective, I mean that it's the most effective pitch in baseball. In 2023, the splitter produced a batting average of 196. That's the same as Clayton Kershaw's batting average against in 2014, the same year he won both the Cy Young and MVP awards. If you're a Major League pitcher looking for that extra edge, the data is clear. Add a splitter. One advantage today's players have is technology. Using pitch tracking devices such as Rapsodo, pitchers are able to measure factors like spin rate, velocity, movement, and mechanics with unprecedented precision. Pitch design has become a science, and pitchers, the scientists. The key to a good splitter, as I alluded to earlier, is spin, or rather, the lack thereof. Of the 20 pitches this season with the lowest average spin rate, 18 of them are splitters. It's this low spin that gives a good splitter its tumbling motion, allowing it to fool batters by dropping off the table at the last second. This is also key to understanding the ongoing splitter revolution. Unlike Bruce Sutter in the 70s, pitchers today are putting their own spin on the pitch. Pun intended. The result has been hybrid pitches, like the so-called splinker, that is, splitter/sinker, thrown by Pirates rookie Paul Skeens. Other pitchers have more traditional split fingers, like the Blue Jays' Kevin Gausman. Gausman throws the pitch over a third of the time, and for a good reason. Over 31 starts last year, batters hit just 200 versus his splitter, compared to 240 against his fastball and 340 against his slider. Another splitter sicko is Alex Cobb, who set a record in 2023 by throwing 83 in one game, coming 1 out away from a no-hitter. Seattle's Bryce Miller adopted the pitch this offseason, joining his teammates Logan Gilbert and George Kirby. Meanwhile in Boston, Tanner Houck, MLB's current leader in F-WAR, throws a split finger 25% of the time, more than double his rate from last year. Splitters are like snowflakes. No two are exactly alike. Some move in on hitters, others away from them. Some drop more, others less. The one constant, though, is that if thrown well enough, the splitter is the closest thing baseball has right now to an unhittable pitch.